Outbound prospecting is one of the most talked about topics in the industry today. If you're a sales leader like me, you're asking the same question over and over. How's outbound going? Let's talk about ways to get reps excited about self-source pipeline in this episode of Closing Time. Hi, I'm Dave Osborne, Chief Sales Officer at Insightly. Welcome to Closing Time, the show for go-to-market leaders. I'm joined today by Jason Bay, founder and CEO of Outbound Squad. Welcome, Jason.
What's up? Good to jam here with you, David.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Jason, you and I were talking a little bit before the session, right? Like, I think outbound is almost the holy grail of building pipeline. It has been for a long time. And I know a lot of folks out there are deadly focused on either adding that to their skill set or to their, their pipe gen strategy, or they're trying to just amplify it, right? So I think this is going to be a really, really relevant topic for a lot of folks. But looking at your past, you've worked with some big brands at Outbound Squad, right? You've worked with Zoom, Gong, CBRE, and the list goes on, right? So by that list, I mean, I assume that means that the challenges with building self-source pipeline isn't just limited to small startups. Is that fair?
Definitely not. If you kind of step back and think about, why is this so hard and why do so few people do it? I mean, it's filled with rejection. I mean, worse than selling. The average win rate's, 10 or 20%, depending on your industry. That means you lose 80% plus of the deals that you work. Well, with outbound, it's one of those things where, hey, if you have a 95 to 98% rejection rate, you're actually doing okay. Yeah, the mindset behind dealing with that amount of rejection is crazy. When you apply for an Ivy League school, the rejection rate is not 95% usually.
Right.
You know, there's all kinds of rejection that an individual faces in sales with prospecting that if anyone had that in their daily job, it would be so unhealthy for them, you know? And I think that's a really big part that as a sales organization, if you're treating outbound like a, hey, David and team, just go make calls and go send emails, and you provide very little enablement or direction or guidance, you're going to have people that pick up the phone and get met with a lot of rejection and resistance. And who would want to continue doing that? So I think shifting into an approach that's more customer centric, that isn't talking all about my product and pitching people who I have not met before, like shifting to something that has less rejection and is more customer centric is a start in the right direction.
Right. So let's talk about like how we kick this off. So let's kind of pretend that, I'm a sales leader. I'm just getting started. We're about to do a stand up to do an outbound motion, right? So we have a meeting, get everyone pumped up about outbound, right? And
Yeah.
everyone leaves being hyped. And then you check in a few weeks later and there's absolutely no movement, right? Like,
Yeah.
what is the disconnect that happens there between, right, like an AE's desire to self source and build their own pipeline to them actually executing and getting it done?
Yeah, so I think that's step number one is sitting down with your account executives, and I call it the sales math. So we have a sales math calculator that we use, and we say, hey, you want to make X amount of dollars in commissions. Let's backtrack that into the revenue that you need to close with your commission rate and say, hey, based on how inbound and SDRs, like that portion of your pipeline, you're going to get 70% of the way there. So that 30% that you need to self-source is worth $60,000 in your pocket, let's say. And then why is that number important? You need to have that whole why conversation, and that needs to be done with a manager individually with each of their reps, so that you're not about to do step number two and pull out an arbitrary activity target and say, all right, David and team, everyone needs to make 30 cold calls a day. No, you want that to be, hey, David, based on your number, if we reverse engineer the math, it looks like you need to make 26 of these calls every single day because your pickup rate is 10%. That's going to give you 2 or 3 conversations. And we know with your conversion rate, that's probably going to be 1 meeting per day. So that's 5 meetings a week, of which you're probably going to close one of those deals. So if you can make it very real, that's step number one. Step number two, the kind of framework, I call it the outbound equation. There's three kind of components to it on the quality side of the equation. So there's a quality and then quantity side. So I need to have activity, no different than if I'm working out and trying to lose weight. I need to exercise for a certain number of minutes, right? There has to be an activity. I focus a lot on the quality side of the equation. So there's three parts on the quality side. It's fit. So who am I reaching out to? Message, what am I saying? Three is delivery, which is I know what the message should be. What are my soft skills and my ability to, when the prospect says hello, execute a great call, to write a compelling email, to handle an objection, to secure a meeting, to get them to show up, etc. So where I would start is the fit piece. I think the number one mistake, I was just on a call right before this with a sales leader, and we were joking around because he just joined a new team around how the worst way to approach a set of accounts is to just go top to bottom in your Salesforce or in Sightly or your whatever. What
Yes.
you want to do is you want to say that 100 accounts that you're going after. How do we say, hey, we know that healthcare is the industry where we're closing the most work right now. We know that VPs of IT are the best place to get a meeting started. Now let's cherry pick and look at all the healthcare accounts. Let's get on LinkedIn Sales Nav and look for newly appointed IT leaders. Let's see if there's anyone that used to be a previous customer that moved to one of these places. Like, let's go through that exercise of the fit component and say outbound is really hard. It's a lot of work. Let's make sure our effort is focused in the right direction. So I'll pause there. That's the most critical thing to nail first is where is my effort going to be directed and at what?
Mhm. How much of that also, Jason, is like a factor of, and I don't have the stats in front of me, but there's always a certain amount of touch points before you potentially do get a response, right? So I
Yep.
think conceptually, if this is your fourth or fifth or sixth call or email or touch point, whatever that looks like, versus the first one, are you prioritizing like those follow ups or those subsequent calls first? Versus, is that something that you're keeping in mind, or is that not necessarily as relevant as like title and et cetera?
Yeah. So I think first deciding what account am I going to go after and who are the individuals that I'm going to target, doing that activity first.
Sure.
Second, we can start to think about our contact strategy.
Okay.
So our sequence, cadence, whatever you want to call it, Orem, Bridge Group, Outreach, Sales Loft, all of the sales engagement vendors, all of their data will generally tell you the same thing. It takes somewhere between 12 and 15 touches to get in touch with most prospects. So the most important thing is that whatever you do, it needs to be multi-channel. So it needs to be phone plus email plus social. Your contact rate will literally triple by having three channels versus one. If you guys listening could guess which channel gets neglected the most, it's definitely the phone. People don't pick up the phone. Uh, multi-day is I can't do 12 touches in one day. It needs to be spread out over 2 to 4 weeks. So multi-channel, multi-day, those are the most kind of key components to it. And the way that you want to think about spreading out the touches is a weekly touch pattern could look like this. It's a Tuesday today. I do phone, email, LinkedIn. I do all of those at once. I do a triple touch. And then I wait 2 days. On a Thursday, I do an email and a follow-up phone call. So that same weekly pattern, I follow 3 weeks in a row. That's going to get my 15 touches. That's a great starting point. Now, the fit piece, what you want to think about is how you segment and like prioritize who you're spending effort on. So like David, you're a VP of sales. Like in terms of my target market, you're the person really ultimately that I want to meet with. I might be meeting with a sales manager or director of sales first, but ultimately I know a VP of sales is a champion. Like that's
Yeah.
going to be someone that can mobilize the training engagement to their CRO. So if I'm reaching out to you, David, I'm going to do that full 15 touch sequence because it's worth it to spend extra time on you because that meeting is really high value to me. Now, if I don't mind meeting with the sales manager, let's say one of your managers to get the deal started, I'm probably not going to exert that much effort. So I might taper off
Fair.
on some of the phone calls, like the manual elements of this that require my manual work. I might taper off on those. So it's really important to think about what accounts are most valuable to you, what types of job titles will typically be most valuable. And it's about putting more effort in the areas where the return is higher and less effort in the areas, honestly, where a sales manager is not getting as much cold outreach as someone like you
Right.
or a CRO. So I need to work harder to get that meeting. And it's also worth more. Does that answer your question? That was kind of a
No, that's
roundabout, really
perfect.
long-winded answer, but that's how I think about the sequencing and like the contact strategy.
No, that's perfect. I was thinking about, and I can't remember the word you used, but like the combo, right? Where historically, or even today, maybe phone calls are the least high contact rate, right? But having that multi-channel strategy is super impactful. So let's talk about maybe taking a step back, right? Talking about activity targets, right? Which gets a bad rep from a lot of folks. But I think where I'm curious to understand is, again, if I'm a sales leader getting an outbound motion out for the first time, right? You talked about looking at historical data and kind of backing your way into a prescriptive approach, right? But let's say we don't have a lot of historical data. So how would you recommend leaders architect the initial activity targets and adapt from there?
Yeah, one, I wouldn't just pull that number out of thin air, which you'd be very surprised. The larger the company, the more they just pull numbers out of thin air. Like are totally arbitrary numbers that they talk to their peers and that's just what they said their activity target was. You could just use industry benchmarks. So if we were going to work backwards, like you should at least know your win rates and you should know what percentage of like an intro calls turn into, a weighted pipeline or a qualified opportunity. You should at least know those metrics. So if we work backwards to how many people would I need to get in touch with in order to get a meeting, I'll give you some benchmarks that you could work off of. So with the total number of contacts that you're reaching out to, booking meetings with somewhere between 5 and 10% of everyone that you reach out to, that's a good starting point to use. And if you wanted to dial it in per channel, the average pickup rate for a cold call is 5%. The average conversion rate of connected cold call into a meeting is around 10%. Your best reps should be in that 25 to 30% range. Email, your open rate should be around 35% on average. Your reply rate's going to probably be around 1 to 3%. The average cold email reply rate is actually 1%, according to Clearbit. That's honestly being a little generous from what I see in a lot of companies. So you could use those benchmarks as a starting point to kind of work backwards around the math. And you need to explain the why behind the math if you're speculating and don't have like real numbers to work off of.
Yeah,
I think people sometimes, like sales leaders, I find they kind of treat their reps like they're idiots or something. You know what I mean? It's like, dude, explain the why behind it. Get them excited about the number, but also like show them that you're like using an objective analysis to come up with the numbers. I think this era of like, especially with younger sales reps coming in, Gen Z, and this is the case with all younger generations typically, but I think very much so at Gen Z, and I'm a millennial. This like I'm going to blindly follow authority just doesn't work anymore. Like that's how I was led as a sales rep. It just doesn't work. Like explain the logic behind the number and what you're asking your reps to do, and you'll have a lot more buy-in.
100% agree. Um, Maybe just to wrap up, I'd love to hear your thoughts on personalization, right? I think that's a nice
Yeah.
kind of dovetail from what we were just talking about there, right? So obviously, you talked about quantity and quality both being important, right? And when doing prospecting, we do need to cast a wide net, but would love to kind of understand how you think about casting a big net versus using kind of a sniper rifle, right? In some situations, so feels like the one to many approach is a little bit behind in the past. So, is that what you're seeing with your client base, or how do you approach that?
The question really is not like whether you should personalize or not. It's really kind of like how do I do this and still remain productive and get out emails?
Right.
So the way that you personalize at scale, as you know, that term has been coined, is how do I find common patterns in the people that I'm reaching out to? So if I was to give you an example, I worked with a company that sells into DevOps leaders. DevOps is essentially the equivalent of sales enablement for reps. They do it for engineers. They make an engineer's life easier. So when they're reaching out to these DevOps leaders, it's like, hey, the situations you're looking for are they hiring engineers right now? Did they recently release a product? Did they recently go through M&A? There's like all these really common like 5 to 10 triggers. Well, you should have an email sequence prepped and ready to go that you can add slight customization to around all of those situations. So, situation based outreach is how you can really prepare for the most common scenarios and have a game plan that's repeatable. So, when you're going through your account list and you're going through the people to reach out to, you're looking for people that fit into the different situations that are really common so that you don't really have to customize that much. That's the big idea. That's how you do that at scale.
That's perfect.
It's not about looking at the person's LinkedIn profile to see where they went to school or the content they post. Make it about the company.
Love it. Love it. All right, folks, that's all the time we have for this episode of Closing Time. Really appreciate you taking the time, Jason. Really, really relevant content. Appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. All of our stuff's at outboundsquad.com. We have a podcast as well, Outbound Squad podcast. So make sure to check it out if you're looking for more tips or how to make a lot of what we talked about today more actionable for you.
Awesome. Remember to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and tick the bell for notifications so you don't miss another episode. We'll see you next time.